What is classical conditioning? Classical conditioning, also known as Pavlovian conditioning, is a type of unconscious or automatic learning. It involves creating associations between a neutral stimulus and an unconditioned stimulus to produce a conditioned response. Here are the key terms involved. Unconditioned stimulus, US. The unconditioned stimulus is a trigger that leads to an automatic response. For example, when you smell your favorite food, your mouth waters involuntarily. This watering is an unconditioned response. In Pavlov's classic experiments with dogs, the unconditioned stimulus was food. Neutral stimulus, NS. A neutral stimulus doesn't initially trigger any response on its own. For instance, hearing the sound of a fan without feeling the breeze is a neutral stimulus. In Pavlov's experiments, the sound of a bell served as the neutral stimulus. Conditioned stimulus, CS. A conditioned stimulus was once neutral but now leads to a response. It becomes associated with the unconditioned stimulus. For example, if you didn't pay attention to dogs before but then got bitten by one, you might now feel fear every time you see a dog. In this case, the dog becomes a conditioned stimulus. Unconditioned response, UR. The unconditioned response is an automatic reaction that occurs without conscious thought when the unconditioned stimulus is present. When you smell food and your mouth waters, the watering is an unconditioned response. Conditioned response, CR. A conditioned response is a learned reaction that didn't exist before. It develops due to the association between the conditioned stimulus and the unconditioned stimulus. Going back to the dog example, the fear you experience after being bitten is a conditioned response 1. Examples of classical conditioning. Pavlov's dogs. Ivan Pavlov conducted experiments with dogs. He paired the sound of a bell, neutral stimulus, with food, unconditioned stimulus. Over time, the dogs associated the bell with food, and the sound of the bell alone could make them salivate, conditioned response. Fear responses. Imagine someone gets caught in a thunderstorm, unconditioned stimulus, and experiences fear, unconditioned response. If this happens repeatedly during thunderstorms, they might start feeling anxious even before the storm begins, conditioned response, associating the storm with fear. Advertising and branding. Companies use classical conditioning in advertising. By pairing their product, neutral stimulus, with positive emotions, unconditioned stimulus, they create a conditioned response. For example, associating a soft drink with happiness or relaxation. Phobias. Phobias often develop through classical conditioning. If someone has a traumatic experience, unconditioned stimulus, related to heights, they may develop a fear of heights, conditioned response. Taste aversions. If you eat something and then get sick, unconditioned stimulus, you might associate that food with feeling ill, conditioned response. This can lead to taste aversions, where you avoid that food in the future. In conclusion, classical conditioning demonstrates how our experiences shape our responses, even when we're not consciously aware of it.